Hello, Starshine. My name is Liz, and this is my channel, Simsational Stories. If you have not seen my videos before, and you enjoy this one, please like and subscribe. And maybe check out my Facebook page, where this whole thing began, as well. Just be aware that I may be way further ahead there than I am here on my channel, so only look it up if you're alright with spoilers. All relevant links are in the description below. And of course, if you're a Sims player and you'd like to download any of the characters featured in my stories, just search the hashtag Simsational Stories on the Sims 4 gallery. All original content is created by This Is Not Eric. Alrighty then. So, welcome. And what is up, Buttercup? Are you having a good day? Or a bad day? Whichever your answer, please allow me to distract you from your life and tell you a story. A Simsational story. Before I begin, though, I'd like to issue this, now abridged for your convenience, blanket content and trigger warning. The following story is just Sims, hey. I'm not going to apologise for treating them terribly, if that's what I've done. But I do want to assure you now that although I mean absolutely no harm, I completely understand if you feel unable to consume my content. Many loves, and we will catch each other on the internet elsewhere. Okay, so now we've gotten that over with, let's go. Today's story is from Magnus Down and the StrangerVille Mystery, and we're at chapter 3. If you have not seen previous chapters and would like to catch up, there are playlists available on my channel so you can hear the entire story in chronological order. The rest of us are going to move on from where we left off last time though. So without further ado. The first place Kil'aya went to was the local StrangerVille library. She wasn't sure, but was she being watched? She tried not to be paranoid. She'd been right to check the library, though. A history of StrangerVille told of what sounded like a meteor crash hundreds of years ago. If the mysterious plant seeds had somehow sprouted way back then that would explain why nobody local seemed to find the strange pulsing plants suspicious. Kil'aya had also noticed something else weird about the people of StrangerVille. Other than completely ignoring the fact that they had an infestation of pulsing plants, a whole bunch of people seemed to be, well, she wasn't sure. They were acting like they were on drugs or something. She couldn't get a sensible word out of them. They'd walk funny and their eyes, you'd have to see it to believe it. Kil'aya tried asking the weird conspiracy theorist Erwin Prize, who ran the local curio shop, about her observations, but unfortunately for her, being more aware of the signs than most Sims, he instantly picked her as an alien and then refused to answer any of her questions. But he did throw her a little bone, albeit accidentally, when he aggressively demanded why she was asking him questions when she was living with one of them. Kil'aya didn't know what to think. Magnus had helped her see that her life on Sixan was empty, and he had filled the hole in her heart with his love. Life with him and little Oberon was wonderful. He had never shown any symptom of deception while discussing the StrangerVille mystery, as Kil'aya was calling it, when she asked, could he really know more? Magnus tried to reassure her. Magic plant stuff wasn't his department. He was all rocket science. And okay, yes, that did mean there was a magic plant department, although they didn't call it that. Or at least there had been. But years before he'd started at the lab, years before he was even born, something had gone wrong and that whole area was restricted now, with access blocked by passwords nobody knew. Or at least nobody Magnus knew. Kil'aya was looking up old newspaper clippings now. After some research, she learned that the lab Magnus worked at is actually the second lab in StrangerVille built by the same company. The first had been closed 35 years ago after a mysterious explosion. An explosion after which strange plants started growing around the town. The old lab was still there though. Kil'aya wondered if she could get in. After taking her boyfriend his lunch one day, Kil'aya confidently walked into the locker room and changed into one of Magnus's lab coats before sneaking outside and up the hill towards the crater. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but a hole in an unguarded fence was all the resistance she met as she headed into the seemingly abandoned lab. Rummaging around the different rooms, Kil'aya managed to come up with more than she knew what to do with. From mysterious seed packets to blurry photographs and encrypted USBs, which, with alien knowledge, she could easily decrypt. The place was filled with evidence. She couldn't believe it. How could they have left so much behind? But when Kil'aya reached the locked lab door, it was then that she realised. It wasn't that they were being irresponsible. It was just that they didn't care about the little things. Nothing she'd found so far was really telling her anything that the old newspaper clippings hadn't already hinted at. There had once been a meteor crash. Years later, the lab she currently stood in was built in that very crater, and then shortly after the lab opened, an explosion had happened. After that explosion, the mysterious plants she was investigating had begun to permeate the local area. Kil'aya walked away that day feeling triumphant. She had a plan. She had enough hard evidence now to complete a dossier on the whole mysterious plant situation. And she was hoping that if she could compile the whole thing and show it to Erwin, that maybe he would finally start to open up to her. She was sure he knew what was going on. Kil'aya thought she had gotten away with the whole visit to the abandoned laboratory at first. But then she noticed that the same sim kept showing up wherever she was. It was weird. She was sure she was going mad at first. But when Kil'aya discreetly asked around and found out that Carol Sweeney was part of the local military's intelligence corps, she knew she was being watched. After that day, Kil'aya knew she had to cover her tracks a little better than she had been doing. She decided that the best plan of action was to just start masquerading as a lab technician. If Carol saw her going to work with Magnus and drinking with the other scientists at the local bar, her visits to the abandoned lab might start to go a bit more unnoticed. Another important thing to focus on was her family, and not just to throw Sweeney off. Oberon was growing up so quickly now, and Kil'aya didn't want to miss a second of it. Her investigation was important too, but she and Magnus wanted to give him as normal a life as possible, despite being a secret alien. And a huge part of that was spending quality time together as a family. Kil'aya decided to try to be honest with Erwin. She was just an alien who'd come to live in StrangerVille with her rocket scientist boyfriend, and she'd noticed something weird going on with the plants and people in her new home, and so she was trying to figure out what was going on. Erwin was a very paranoid sim though, and she could tell he was not buying her story, despite how true it was. She needed to do something more. It was embarrassing. It was stupid. It didn't even do anything. After all, it was just an upside-down colander on her head. But somehow agreeing to wear one changed her in Erwin's eyes from someone who could not be trusted into a confidant. Suddenly he was all smiles as he told her what she needed was a key card to get through that locked lab door. And not only was Erwin going to give her the key card, he was going to go with her and help her discover the truth. Kil'aya was grateful for the company. Magnus was a wonderful partner in so many ways, but he didn't seem to have any interest in her investigation. Now she wouldn't be alone in her quest. Erwin was actually part of a large underground club of conspiracy theorists who had been waiting years for someone with the courage Kil'aya was showing. He himself was a little afraid too, but he was bold enough to come with her at least. None of his friends would even let him tell Kil'aya about their club. She was good enough to do the heavy lifting, but not to know the truth, apparently. As the doors to the secret lab unsealed and clouds of plant spore burst out, Kil'aya instantly regretted her decision. What had she done? Erwin laughed at her concern, though. Why did she think the scientists had sealed the place up? It wasn't to protect themselves. It was to protect everyone else from what was down there. And what was down there? At first, Kil'aya didn't think there was anything. But as she and Erwin descended down some stairs, they heard an odd noise. Following its sound, they discovered that it was made by pulsing plants, like those found outside in the lab, only far more advanced. These plants moved towards their bodies as they came closer, and Kil'aya was certain that if they weren't sealed inside their canisters, they might have been dangerous. Kil'aya didn't exactly remember what happened next. They had been all through the lab and were heading towards a misty, spore-filled corridor when things started to get hazy. Literally. The whole corridor seemed to fill with blue smoke and pink dots as both Kil'aya and Erwin lost consciousness. They lost about 13 hours that day. Had they stayed in the lab or gone somewhere? Kil'aya and Erwin never knew for sure. All they could remember was a deep connection to one another, and an even deeper connection to something else. Something greater than them. Something nurturing that felt almost motherly? When they woke up from their possession, if that's what it was, Erwin didn't like the term, they were back upstairs and the lab door was sealed again. Checking her pockets, Kil'aya was relieved to find that she still had the keycard to get them in again, if they needed to. But first, they needed to figure out what the heck had just gone on. Whatever it was that had gone on in the hours they lost had changed a lot about StrangerVille. As soon as they walked outside the door of the lab, Erwin and Kil'aya started coughing. There were spores everywhere, just like the ones downstairs in that corridor, but less condensed and more spread out. They were everywhere. And the plants had grown. What had they done? And that brings us to the end of Chapter 3 of Magnus Down and the StrangerVille Mystery. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can tune in soon to hear the next chapter. Like I said, look us up on Facebook for spoilers. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Bye!